let's go ahead and start this week off. So, okay. Well, welcome everybody. This is week 5 video conference. It's on Sunday this week because I'm still on vacation. My apologies. But just so you know, I will be back in town on Wednesday, and I'm going to plan on having our next video conference on Thursday like we normally do. So if there's any issues with that, please let me know. If you guys think that Sunday's better, great. I think Thursdays are a little bit better because at least you have 3 or 4 days to apply what we go over in the video conference. But if for some reason you guys need Sunday, let me know, and I will keep that available for everybody. So, okay. Oh, okay. I just got a chat. Okay, Amy said she can hear me. Wonderful. Okay. Okay. Well, Zoom tells me that someone said something in chat, whether or not I have to check one up. So that's good to know. Okay. So this week I'm going to go over the EOQ assignment. I'm going to provide an example. Obviously, it's not going to be exactly like you guys' example for obvious reasons, but I'm hoping it's close enough that you guys will be able to understand what we're doing with EOQ. I really want to spend more time with this assignment because we're going to start building upon this as a foundation going forward. When we start talking about multiple order quantities and all this stuff, we start to remove some of the constraints of EOQ that we talked about last week. And so it's really important that we understand the basics of EOQ before we go forward. Then we're going to go over push versus pull supply chains. This is going to be a very brief overview. I'm not going to go too much in the weeds. You can probably teach a full class on push and pull supply chain differences. But I'm just going to basically just give you some generalities as to what they generally do, what they're good for, which one's best for what scenarios. Just very basic overview. And then I'm briefly going to go over safety stocks, what they do, why we have them, what their function is, and I'll try to give some differences in how they're used between both pull and push. But textbook focuses mainly on the push strategy for safety stocks. And pull strategies are usually called buffer stocks because when we deal with pull, we're dealing with the flow of goods instead of inventory levels. So they're viewed a little bit differently, and I'll try to go over those distinctions when we get to safety stocks. So without further ado, let's go ahead and start with our economic order quantity sample. So here's an example that I created. We have a warehouse that's obligated to transfer 1,200 units to a distributor each week. So basically, we have to send 1,200 units to a distributor each week. So every time we make a shipment, we have to pay $50 per order. Okay. So the warehouse, which is you, has to pay $1.50 for each unit, and we charge the distributor $7 per unit. Now, the $7 per unit will be used now, just so you know. This is going to be used when we start dealing with our profit, maximizing our profit. Later on in the class, in this class, we're going to talk about how the distributor or how the supplier and the retailer, how their profit works. And we can structure contracts so that the profitability of each player is affected accordingly. Sometimes you want the risk and the profit to go to certain people. So that's ahead of time. So we're not going to deal much with the $7 per unit, profit right now. So, okay, annual holding costs are 10% of inventory, or 15 cents per unit per year. Okay, and that basically, we calculated that from the $1.50 for each unit, and that's 10% of that. So 10% of $1.50 is 15 cents. So we're going to calculate economic order quantity and the total annual costs. Now, economic order quantity. What I've seen with this class, well, for the last few classes, is that everyone understands the calculations. I think they pretty much understand the concepts. Just sometimes they have a hard time understanding what is what within each basket. So I'm going to generally go over each one and then compare it to my example. So demand, number of units needed per period times the number of weeks. The textbook, I think, says 50 weeks for a for a year, which is it's standard, I guess. You know, I've seen 50, I've seen 52. I've seen a few times where I've seen 48. Just depends. And just so you know, economic quantity, order quantity, can be done with. You don't have to do a year. Okay, you can always do a quarter. You can do 6 weeks, 8 weeks. Generally, it's done. I've seen the majority of done for either quarter or yearly. So usually it's for the big periods. You rarely see this unless you have a lot of really fast moving product. So don't feel that it's always going to be a yearly thing. You can use it for smaller periods. Okay, so our fixed setup costs is $50 per order. So we get that from the shipping and handling fee. Okay, this is a fixed cost. So, okay, fixed costs are costs that do not change regardless of the amount of items within the order. So the shipping and handling fee is $50 per order, regardless of whether we purchase 1,000 or 10,000 or 100,000. So that's your fixed setup cost, $50,000 per order. Now, holding costs is the cost to hold our goods, and we got that from our the annual holding costs, or 10% of the inventory value. So to keep our inventory in a warehouse somewhere is 10% of the inventory on hand. So that's where that 10%. So that's where that 10% comes from. Now, some students sometimes say, "Yeah, but this inventory changes up and down." But don't forget, EOQ has certain constraints, and one of the constraints is that the demand is constant, and that it is reliably known. So if you want to do this on paper sometime, if you take any number, let's say 100, and you decrease it in a set period, like one at a time or 3 at a time, if you take a sum of all those numbers and you take the average of all of them, the average of them will always be right in the middle. So when we deal with inventory value, we were going to assume that when we do our average inventory, that later on when we do our calculations, we're going to do this number times our average inventory. So the average inventory, like I said, if you take a set number and you decrease it at a constant rate, you basically take half of that number, and that's where your average will be. So just keep that in mind. So, so the EOQ is the square root of the first number on the top is 2 times our 50, okay, which is our fixed setup costs, times 60,000, which is 60,000 units that we owe every period. Okay, it's 1,200. The demand here. All right, let me just. Whoops. Sorry, let me get my drawing thing out here. Oopsie. A little drawing thing here. So the demand is 1,200 per week. Okay, and then 50 weeks in a year, and that's 1,200 times 50 is 1,200. 1,200 times 50 is 60,000. So that's where 60,000 comes from. And then we divide it by our holding cost, which is 0.15. So if we do the EOQ, it comes out to 6,324.55. Now, you can't ship a partial unit, so you're always going to round up because you always want to make sure you have enough of this quantity. Okay, I guess in theory you could ship 6,324, but for the most part, we want to satisfy the entire amount here. So the COQ is going to be important as we go forward. Now, so EOQ, once again, is our optimum order quantity based upon our setup costs, our holding costs, and our demand over a certain period. And once again, the constraints are such that all of these are known and constant. If any of these are not constant, like let's say the holding costs decrease as you add some more, then what you do, you basically place stop points in your calculations where you would say, okay, well, there's actually better formulas for this. I've seen people use EOQ for that, but then you have to start changing the formula and stuff. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole, but just remember that EOQ is only good if you've got constant, unchanging, and reliable data. Okay, and if you have any questions on that, look at the EOQ recording that I did for last week, and at the end of it, I went through a few of the constraints that I think were in the textbook, and I think I added some that I found in other references. But if there's any questions, please feel free to ask. So now, total annual costs. It's funny, more than half of the time, students forget to add the material costs, which basically is how much it costs to make, how much it costs to purchase the goods. Okay, it's not a big deal, but just don't forget to add the cost of the materials that you purchase from your manufacturer. So the annual material cost, first cost, is the annual demand, which is 60,000 times the cost per item. It's very simple. So we pay $1.50 for each item, 60,000 items. Our annual material cost is 90,000. Okay. So our annual ordering costs is basically we got to take our demand and divide it by the order quantity. That tells us how many times we place an order. Okay. So in this example, we have 60,000 that we order per year divided by our EOQ. Okay, we're going to assume that we're going to have a constant set order amount throughout the year. So 60,000 divided by 6,325 gives me, I'm going to guess, around 9,000. You take that number and multiply it by our fixed costs, our fixed setup costs, which are the costs that are the costs per order that are fixed. In this instance, it was the shipping and handling, which is right here. So our fixed ordering cost is shipping and handling right here. Okay. So then we take the number of orders that we make per year, multiply that by the fixed costs per order of $50, and we get $474.31. So that's our annual ordering cost. Now our annual holding costs is very similar. We take our average inventory and we're going to multiply it by our holding costs. And this is where we come back to where I mentioned before. If you take, our inventory is going to deplete at a constant rate. And the maximum inventory we're ever going to have at one time is 6,325, because one of the assumptions is that we order at 0. So our inventory will go from 6,325 to 0, depleting at a constant rate. So if you take that constant rate, whatever it is, and you take the average of all those constant rates, it's always going to be right in the middle, which is 6,325 divided by 2. Does this make sense?
Ken, this is Jeff.
Yes.
I'm going to play dummy here, as you and I have been emailing back and forth, and
Sure.
Amy and I have talked about this. I'm going to boldly ask you to plug in the numbers from this week's case, because what I sent to you yesterday I thought was right on spot for total annual cost. However, the numbers are not jiving.
Yeah. When I looked at I think your fixed costs were wrong though. I'm gonna give you a little bit of a teaser on this. Your fixed costs is stated in the problem. And the teaser for the rest of class. And did you, okay, you may have, maybe I looked at the wrong one. So yeah, what I was looking at was your fixed cost was, you had it down as like $5, something, which was really low. But,
Well, one of the iterations that I sent you, I had the decimal point in the wrong place for,
okay,
no,
okay.
that was for the carrying cost for the warehouse. I had at 50 cents versus $5. So it's actually $6
Okay.
per 50,000. So it ended up being 300,000 per unit cost total for carrying.
Okay. Okay. Maybe I
Does
miss.
that make more sense?
It does. Yeah. So yeah. So then your fixed cost would be correct. And all you would do is just basically you would take your
Well, $20 per 50 orders. It's $1,000 per annum, and carrying cost is 12.5.
okay. I think I don't want to give away too much in this, obviously, but
Yeah, I'm sorry.
no. So if you had I don't have the unfortunately, I only have one screen, so I don't have my cheat sheet with me. But if you take
So yeah,
the
this is personal, so we can take it offline. And
yeah, of
I
course,
know you're so traveling. I just want to make sure, because I think I'm on the right line. Amy and I talked about this throughout the past couple of days,
yeah,
and
you
so
may
I
be
think
on the
I
right
think
line.
we're
Yeah,
good.
okay,
Yeah.
you
All
may
right. Thanks.
be, maybe I missed something, and if so, I greatly apologize. But I will relook at it. But yeah,
Yeah,
it's
no worries.
basically huh?
Yeah, I said yeah, no worries.
Okay. Either way, I'll look at it and revise my comments if I misread something. So yeah, so
Okay.
then and then back to the holding cost. Basically, you take your average, which is your EOQ divided by 2, multiply that by your holding cost per item, and then in this example, it's 474.37. Um, so then you add up all the numbers, and in this example, it comes out to 90,948.68. Okay. One student, when I was grading this paper, who he had all the things correct, was surprised. He asked me why the annual the annual costs aren't very elastic compared to total inventory, and the reason why, it kind of is, but we don't really deal with the total inventory except to find out the number of shipments. We care about the number of shipments and the size of each shipment more than we do about the total number. So like in this case, you may, if you double the amount of materials required, um, you may double the um, the ordering costs and the holding costs, but some of the things may not exactly double. Um, so there is some elasticity involved. I haven't gone through the trouble of like just doubling things and making a spreadsheet and see what happens. But we're going to deal with that in part with our multiple order quantities and things like that coming forward. But so when we get there, feel free to ask questions. But all right. Any questions? Okay. So Don, I'm assuming you're still there. Um, so now I'm going to briefly talk
Yes,
about
sir, I'm still here.
wonderful. Okay. I'm going to quickly talk about a pull system. Okay. So a pull system is a system where we push, well, we don't put, well, where inventory flows through the supply chain based upon actual consumption rather than forecasting. The way this works is when consumption is detected by the retailer, we send a demand for product through the system. So we pull stuff through the system. Okay. So in this regard, the pull systems are pretty much predicated on demand rather than forecasting. Now, to be fair, there is no perfect pull system, so there's still some forecasting. The forecasting comes into the amount of lead time it takes. This is why pull systems really try hard to reduce lead time, because the more you reduce the lead time, the more of a pure pull system you have. So in a pull system, we monitor and replenish the supply chain inventory based upon consumption rather than forecasting. We're not as reliant on forecasting as a push system is. So in a pull system, each link in the supply chain holds maximum expected demand within an average replenishment time. This is where the lead time comes in. If it takes 2 or 3 weeks to replenish a certain stock of goods, then we pretty much have we leave enough inventory in each of the spots within the pull system to maintain the amount of flow during that replenishment time. Okay, so if let's say our replenishment time is 2 weeks, and 2 units per day flow through there, we would make sure that we'd have 2 times 14, we'd have 28 units worth of stock in that location so that we can maintain a constant flow of goods going through the system. Now, of course, we have unreliability in replenishment time. Sometimes, we have variations in replenishment time combined with variations in demand. Because don't forget, we talk about expected demand. So that right there tells us that we still need a forecast of sorts, but our forecast is set upon the average replenishment time window. If you have a forecast time that is greater than your average replenishment time window, you're setting yourself up for failure. So unless you've got very low variation in your replenishment time. So, which is, I guess, is possible. So each link receives what is shipped or sold, and we use buffer management, which basically, I'm going to talk about safety stocks in a minute, but safety stocks are used to hedge against variations in demand. Well, same in a pull system. A pull system, we use buffers. We use what are called buffer stocks to dampen the effects of demand on our flow of products. I talked briefly on this in the demand smoothing recording that I did last week. So let me know if there's any questions on that. And then, and this is a key thing, pull systems focus on actual market demand and not forecasting. In our actual market demand, we look at the most recent demand and we react to that. Now, to do that, you must have very low replenishment time and low lead times. For the most part, lead time and replenishment times are similar within a pull system. That's why lean systems really need to have very disciplined lead times and replenishment times, because we don't focus on forecasting. And what this does, this reduces oscillations that cause over and under inventory. We're going to cover the bullwhip effect in a few weeks. I think that's week 9. And it's basically going to show us how forecasting can cause oscillations in our demand. And these are artificial oscillations too. So I will keep it at that, and I will go into more detail in that. But so pull systems are more resistant to oscillations because we use more real-time data. This is where the VMI comes in. VMIs are very good with pull systems because we're able to share the real-time data with all the players within a lean system, and they can adjust their replenishment times accordingly based upon real-time data. Whereas if you have a push system, you generally are not going to use the most recent demand data. One example of this is like when we did our pricing strategies. When you do rebates and coupons, I think I covered this 2 weeks ago, and in the class, but when you use rebates and coupons, you actually artificially stimulate demand such that you get people who may have waited for something to buy something now. So your demand goes up, but it's not necessarily new people that are buying stuff. So you get this artificial demand spike, which when you sense it, I talk about it with the Campbell soup example. And actually, I think Jeff had some really good examples on that too when he was with Dell. So marketing is very good at creating fake demand oscillations, which creates really big headaches for supply chains. So that's in general what a pull system is. Okay, so we pull products through the supply chain to the customer as they are consumed. And in general, this requires us to have low lead times and very fast replenishment times. That's a prerequisite for a very good pull system. And just don't forget, you always hear about lean systems don't use forecasting. Well, you'll never have a perfect pull system unless you can get products from point A to point B instantaneously, which I think is still impossible. So there's a little bit of forecasting involved. We are just less reliant on forecasting in a pull system than we are with a push system. Okay. So which one is best, push or pull? I got this example from one of my books that I have here, and I'm going to go ahead and try to explain this without falling on my sword. But let's say we've got three types of products in our supply chain. We have a cheetah product. These are products that move very fast. We have very fast and very high demand for these. These things fly off the shelves. We have a zebra product, which is average. It's it's nothing spectacular. Then we have an elephant, and this is maybe like an aircraft. We make a handful every year, and the demand's pretty slow. There's nothing out of the ordinary. In a push system, this is fine. What we do is we allocate our resources accordingly. We allocate our resources to produce a lot of cheetahs, an average amount of zebras, and a handful of elephants, because a push system chases the demand forecasting. Okay? But what happens if all of a sudden the elephant product becomes a cheetah product? All of a sudden we have a very slow moving product that instantly flies off the shelves. In a push system, what will happen is we won't see this happening until our forecasting tells us the problem exists. Or like in the Meditech example, customer service says something to us. But usually, because of the way that we silo our organizations, we don't say anything until the forecasting tells us, hey, this elephant's a cheetah all of a sudden. Well, all of a sudden, the supply chain, which is used to making cheetah products and elephant products, now suddenly has to make this elephant product into a cheetah product. And now we have to worry about time it takes to change over. Now we talk about manufacturing problems, like changing over dies and all these things, changing the product line over to move faster. Let's say at the same time the cheetah becomes slower. What's going to happen is during that period when there is a lack of sight into what's happened, you're going to flood the market with cheetah products that no longer aren't wanted, and you're going to have a sudden demand for elephant products that are suddenly wanted. And the zebra is pretty much just going to be the same. So in this example, you have a heightened threat of over inventory and under inventory when you have a change in the flow of products going through your system. Because push systems focus on economies of scale. We want to make just as much as possible. And this is where EOQ comes in. You want to make EOQ is also used for manufacturing. So So this is where we create the perfect economic order quantity, and we build that. But what if suddenly the demand changes? All of a sudden the push system they're not that flexible. Now, pull systems are. Pull systems deal with small batch sizes, and we deal with smaller order sizes. So we don't worry so much about economies of scale. We don't worry about making 10,000 of something to get the economies of scale so that we reduce the fixed cost per unit. In a pull system, we create small batch sizes as quickly as possible. And instead of one giant shipment to a store, we may send 5 or 6 shipments because our focus is not on economies of scale, but on flexibility. And this is important. So if you're looking at using a pull or push system, and I've seen arguments in management meetings over what's the best. And I will leave you with the Taiichi Ono quote. He said, don't use Toyota tools to fix a problem unless you have Toyota problems. A pull system is very good for a very dynamic market where you have fluctuating demands all the time, and you have a robust and flexible supply chain system that's able to change, or if you are redesigning it so that you're going to increase flexibility to make smaller batches or anything else, and you're not so worried about economies of scale. If you have a relatively known demand and it's known to be rather static, like not changing very much, or management is willing to accept that as a constraint, then a push system is better because you can utilize economies of scale to drive down costs. Push systems drive down costs through economies of scale. Pull drives down costs through flexibility, which reduces inventories. Okay, so that's generally the difference between a pull and a push system and which one is best for what. Okay. Do I need to go over anything on this? I'm going to assume if I don't hear anything that there's no questions, or if I don't see any chats come up. Okay. So now, in a push system, you will see that this is a graphic of a traditional production warehouse where we have our large stocks are located. Our large stocks are located near the stores. We try to push our stock as far up the supply chain as possible so that we reduce the lead time between the shop and the stocks. Okay, so like in this example, if we're selling produce, we want to put as much stock as close to the shop as possible so that when there's a demand, they can pull from these stocks. Okay, warehouses are pretty much close to where the demand takes place, and we have small stocks here to feed the any changes in demand that may be seen at any of these sites. When we talked about risk pooling, this is kind of what's happening. What we'll do is we'll put a buffer stock to service multiple locations. And in this example, we put the large stocks in the push system close to the shop or close to the retailer. So, and sometimes you'll see, like for instance, even here, they may have a safety stock here, maybe sometimes. They may have like a smaller warehouse here for contingencies. But the goal for a push system to reduce inventories is to share the safety stocks, which I'm going to go over in a minute, is to share the safety stocks with as many retailers as possible. And if you don't remember how the concept of risk pooling, there's a video in one of the assignments where I went over risk pooling and the concepts behind this. I'm not going to repeat it here, but But if you can't find it, or if you have any questions, even after watching it, let me know, and I will go over it in class or at the next video con if that's good for you guys also. Now, in a pull system, we have the buffer stocks close to the production warehouse. And we have small stocks near the shop, okay? Because we only are concerned about having enough stock near the shop to cover the cover the replenishment time, okay? And this is because we focus on smaller shipments, so we have more flexibility in moving stock. We don't have to worry about putting huge stocks in because we don't worry about forecasting. We have to cover a smaller time window. We only have to cover how much time it takes for stock to go from the production warehouse to the stock here. So, and the buffer stocks are basically placed here to manage multiple pull stocks. Same concept as risk pooling, okay? Except for now, I'm going to go over this in more detail in theory of constraints. And theory of constraints is similar to lean. There are some differences. I'm going to do a quick video conference on theory of constraints on week 9 or week 10 to just give you that. But basically, in a theory of constraint system or in a lean system, we worry about one quick difference. Lean worries about reducing waste within the supply chain system to reduce the time between the warehouse to the end user, okay? Whereas theory of constraints worries about reducing bottlenecks within the system. Slight difference. Waste is, for those of you who know lean terminology, you have the 7 types of waste, and you basically attack all this waste within the system. Theory of constraints says some wastes are more important than others. Some wastes are necessary. The goal is to have constant flow through the system, and we improve the flow by identifying the point in the system that is blocking the flow the most. So in a lean system, a buffer stock can be products, but when we talk about lean systems within the context of theory of constraints, we could be time, it could be money, it could be extra people. Stocks takes on a new meaning. I'll go into this more in week 10, but just realize that when we start dealing with buffer stocks, we're worried about having stocks available to reduce oscillations in replenishment time and not reduce oscillations in demand. Although demand is taken into consideration, we're more worried about being able to replenish the products as they're pulled, because we focus on sending smaller shipments as a way to increase the flexibility of our supply chain. Okay, that's an important difference between a pull system and a push system. All right. I'm assuming there's no questions. So now, but if there is, please let me know. Okay, so now, safety stocks. This is an important concept within supply chains because this is how we deal with variations in our supply chain. So, quick definition: safety stock is stock deliberately held with the intention of meeting unpredictable demand or protecting against unreliable supply. So unpredictability is the heart of variation. So safety stock is used to protect ourselves against variation. So the more variation we have, the more safety stock we have to have. And this variation can take place in demand or in supply. And I've seen this rear its ugly head on both sides. Working in defense, I've seen, well, when I worked at Boeing, Boeing had an issue where they kept, they had suppliers who were able to provide a low level of products relatively easily with very low variation, but when they were forced to make more airplanes, the variation in shipments became huge. And to make things worse, when they were making more products to fill out orders, the quality of the products became horrible. So, so in that case, they had both unpredictable demand, in which they had to make more airplanes, although it was kind of predictable because marketing just sold more planes than they could be built. So it could have been predicted if marketing would have listened to supply chain. But the suppliers were very unreliable. So the increase in demand introduced variation to the suppliers. So when we look at supply chain, we've got basically three factors that we look at when we determine safety stocks. So the demand rate, how much, basically the amount of demand per period. Okay. Within this, we look at the variation in the demand rate. We usually assume that the demand itself is covered by the normal inventories, but the safety stocks are going to deal with the amount of variation within that demand rate that we have to protect against. So let's say if we have a demand of 100 and our variation is 5, and we need to cover against 6 sigma with variation. Well, we'll be 3 sigma from the mean. So we would have 15. So we'd have to have 15 units in our safety stock. And the safety stock is dependent on how much customer service level we wish to have. Customer service level is the percentage chance that we are able to give the customer what they want when they want it. And management will say we want to have a 98% customer service level. We're okay with 2% of the customers not getting what they want. Sometimes they say 99.86 or whatever 6 sigma is. So you basically calculate that much sigma worth of products, and that's your safety stock. Okay. And of course, it depends on industry and types of consumers, everything else, obviously. So supply responsiveness. This is where the variation in supply comes in. Okay. How quickly the consumed stock can be replaced and how reliably it can be replaced. And then we deal with replenishment lead time. This is forgotten in a lot of our safety stocks that I've studied. I've never worked for a company that really used a lot of safety stocks, but I've studied, and I know quite a few people who work with safety stocks, and they frequently say that replenishment lead time is usually overlooked because you may say, okay, when you have high variation and the variation changes frequently within your demand, the order lead time may also change because when in a supply chain system you have like a set order size. Well, if you end up changing the order size, the lead time to fulfill that order may change also. So the time to order it may change, the time to produce it may change, and then the time to transport it may also change. So you have to look at the time it takes to take this stock, put it into place. Sometimes you'll see that as included with the lead time, but just realize that replenishment lead time needs to also be included when you look at safety stocks. So that's a quick down and dirty on safety stocks. There's assignment for week 5 that's going to deal with multiple order quantities. I will probably put together something in the middle of the week when I get back on Wednesday to kind of help you guys through that. Between now and then, if there's any questions, please let me know. Real quick, factors influencing, this is one last slide, sorry. Factors influencing safety stock placement, customer tolerance time. This is where the customer service level comes in. If you have a customer that's willing to tolerate waiting, or if you're like Amazon and you could do certain incentives to allow customers to wait, you may have a lower customer service time, in which case you can have less safety stock in there. Okay. Variable rate of demand is the variability in your demand. Of course, your variability in your supply that we talked about, and the inventory flexibility. And this is where you design where to put the safety stock. Don't forget the principles. I actually meant to say principles of postponement, where we design the supply chain so that we place the flexibility, where we push the variation in the supply chain as far up, as close to the supplier as possible. This influences where the best place to put the safety stocks. Obviously, you want to put the safety stocks in the places with the most flexibility. So you can actually design your supply chain to create an optimum location for safety stocks that has the most effective location. If you have a question on that, look at the principles of postponement video. If you still have questions, please let me know. I don't think the textbook covers principles of postponement, but if you have a question over it and it's still vague, let me know, and I can put something together to kind of help out to link that to safety stocks if you guys feel it's helpful. But once again, I think I've mentioned several times, I really rely on you guys to tell me what I can really put together to make things make more sense for you guys. So if you see something that just makes no sense, or even something that I may put together that makes no sense, let me know. Because if you probably have a question, then there's probably others. And I don't mind putting something together real quick or putting out a little video to talk about it or something like that. So please feel free to let me know if I can ever clarify anything. So with that in mind, as I said, I'm probably going to put something together on this week's assignment, this upcoming week's assignment, when I get back from vacation on Wednesday night, Thursday morning. So between now and then, please feel free to send me any questions you have on the assignment. The assignment is a little more complex than the one that you just went on this week. We added a few more variables. So let me know if there's anything I can do to help out, and I will do what I can to get something to you, even while I'm on vacation here. But, okay. Are there any questions?
Sounds great.
Okay. I always have this fear that I just throw things in these videos and I take too much time. I don't take enough time to go through stuff. So please let me know if I blew you guys away and I needed to slow down or I need to cover something else. So, and a question here. Oh, okay. Well, Don, I hope it helped out. Oh yes, please. As I mentioned, I'm gonna let everybody put their stuff in on Tuesday without penalty. So take what I went over here. I'm going to try right now before I go to bed and put something on YouTube, and I'll put the link. Yeah, it's like 1 o'clock in the morning here. So my wife next door probably saying, when is he going to go to bed?
Yeah, where are you on vacation?
Exactly. Well, my wife can tell you stories about our vacations and me teaching and me, going to school and stuff. And, she's.
No, where are you?
Oh.
From a timing standpoint, because when you're based in Dubai and
yes,
I'm East Coast, so we're 8 hours.
I almost feel guilty telling you. I'm in Bangkok, Thailand right now.
Okay.
So yeah, we just got finished with 6 days in Phuket. So
nice.
Yeah, it's nice. It's close to Dubai and relatively cheap. So we're in Bangkok doing last minute shopping before we fly back to Dubai. So we fly out Wednesday afternoon our time here, which is Wednesday morning your time, and I get back like 8 o'clock Wednesday, which is 8 o'clock Wednesday morning your time. So Yeah,
Excellent.
it's.
Enjoy and be safe and have fun.
I will. And once again, I know I say it over and over and over again. Feel free to let me know if I can help you guys out. Okay. I don't. I honestly don't mind. Okay. Well, everybody, have a great day, and and I'll chat
All
to you
right.
guys
Thanks.
later. Take care.